half the adult population is vaccinated in Britain, but less good news in Europe. As UK jabs reach a milestone, a surge in COVID cases on the continent threatens progress here and, yet again, puts European summer holidays in doubt.
There should be no international travel unless it's absolutely necessary until the 17th of May, and then the Global Travel Task Force will make a judgment.
Also this afternoon, MPs say the blanket ban on protests due to COVID must be lifted as several take place today regardless. Stand up and be counted. Tonight's the night to declare yourself and your identity in the England and Wales Census. And after 900 years of silence, a volcano roars to life in Iceland.
This is ITV News with Chris Shipp.
Hello, good afternoon. A significant milestone has been reached as half the UK adult population have now received their first dose of the COVID vaccine. The Prime Minister and the Health Secretary have both hailed the vaccination programme a fantastic achievement and a national success. But there are warnings for the UK that summer trips abroad could be unlikely as parts of Europe bring in fresh lockdowns to tackle another wave of the virus there. That could soon have an impact on the fight against coronavirus here, as our political correspondent David Wood reports.
For every jab administered, another person starts building protection.
That's it, all done.
And now the balance has tipped. More adults have had a jab than haven't. These patients in London were thrilled to be called up.
It's an unbelievable experience. I'm very grateful.
I sort of hope it might make things easier for me to move around.
I have been more anxious and I'm particularly pleased to have got it.
Almost 500 people had their jab here today. But the pace of the rollout will slow down next month because of a significant reduction in supply.
The half of adults who have now had their first dose of a COVID vaccine is the half that is most at risk of the effects of COVID-19. And medics are already confident that the vaccination programme is reducing the amount of people turning up at hospital needing treatment and keeping infection rates down. The big question, though, is all of that enough to ensure that the third wave that's breaking across Europe doesn't reach the UK?
Thousands have fled Paris as parts of France rush back into lockdown. The UK's vaccination programme is further ahead than the rest of the continent, but epidemiologists warn it may not be enough.
In terms of the whole population, we've only vaccinated about a third, and that too most with a single dose. So we are quite far from our entire population being fully vaccinated and protected. So it's very important that we keep transmission down alongside vaccine rollout, because that's the only thing that's going to prevent more cases.
Shops are locked down once again in Poland, and restrictions are likely in Germany too. Even if we can stop a third wave in the next few weeks, some scientists are warning ministers that high rates elsewhere could ban foreign holidays for us for months.
There shouldn't be international travel unless it's absolutely essential until the 17th of May. And after that, we have a Global Travel Task Force, which I chair alongside my colleague, the Transport Secretary, with all of the travel companies on how we can open up international travel safely.
For now, anyone eligible is being urged to join the vaccine queue, as ministers hope the rollout is fast enough to stop the flow of a third wave. David Wood, ITV News.
A number of protests have been taking part across the country today, some in defiance of lockdown rules, which demonstrators claim are anti-free speech. More than 60 MPs and peers have also signed a letter claiming the restrictions on the right to protest could be unlawful. And as Dan Rivers reports, they're taking place in the wake of last week's outcry over the way officers broke up the vigil in memory of Sarah Everard.
Using smoke flares to signal their last-minute protest site, one of the groups gathering today was determined to make their point despite repeated warnings from the police they'd be in breach of COVID rules. This gathering was to voice anger at the continuing lockdown coming a year to the day since the first restrictions were put in place. Most were not wearing masks. The police made several arrests.
Black Lives Matter!
But there was also an anti-racism protest in South London, which was smaller and more socially distanced. Campaigners say the legal position is unclear.
We had a court ruling last week that clarifies that protest can be lawful under the current lockdown restrictions. And we also know that police have a duty to facilitate protest, but there's still a lot of confusion.
These protests have drawn a wide range of groups. Across the capital, all determined to have their say and breach COVID restrictions. The police say they will issue on-the-spot fines if necessary and could arrest people if they refuse to disperse. It comes a week after the much criticised policing of the Sarah Everard vigil on Clapham Common. But one former senior police officer thinks a distinction must be made between what happened here and today's protests.
The Sarah Everard vigil was a different matter. I mean, it was a vigil as opposed to a march or a demonstration, and I think that's a significant difference. I think there is a degree of selfishness by people who want to sort of protest and march at this time.
Shame on you!
It wasn't just in London either. This was Truro in Cornwall, one of a number of other protests around the country. These scenes come as more than 60 MPs have signed a letter asking the Home Secretary to relax COVID rules and allow protests, describing the current ban as a stain on our democracy. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
Outdoor centres which cater for school trips and residential stays are warning a third of them could close permanently unless they are allowed to reopen after Easter. The activity centres have now been closed for a year, and while children have been allowed back to school, their education is being damaged, it's claimed, because they're not learning the vital team-building skills that other children have had. Ben Chapman reports.
In the Peak District, these ropes have been empty for a year now. No children to break the silence. In that time, 10,000 of them would normally have come to climb and learn at this centre, many of them on residential school trips.
I think we're talking about doing permanent damage to the educational infrastructure of the UK.
They say it's vital they're allowed to reopen for the summer term.
We stand to lose maybe a third of the sector's residential outdoor centre capacity if we don't get an opportunity to trade until much later in the year.
Across the country, 30 outdoor education centres have already closed. Now some 200 teachers and campaigners, including some high-profile names, have warned the Prime Minister that if centres like this aren't allowed to reopen, a generation of children could miss out on what they have to offer.
It's absolutely huge, this. This is an opportunity for children who, for the last year, many of them, millions of them, have been sitting at their flat windows, unable to run around, unable to communicate closely with their friends, unable to get out there in the fresh air, see the countryside.
Teachers say disadvantaged children and those in inner cities stand to lose the most.
Right, anybody got anything else?
But despite classes returning in England, there's no date yet for school trips to restart. So while these Year 6s can enjoy a non-uniform day, they've missed out on residential trips.
I really wanted to stay overnight, and I just wanted to have the experience that everyone else had, because when they went, we've seen photos and it just looked amazing.
I think it's good to have a break outside of school and to actually do something, but also learn and learn to have fun at the same time.
The government says it's keeping its guidance on school trips under review, but outdoor centres want to reopen when hotels do, and say neither they nor the children can afford for them to remain closed. Ben Chapman, ITV News in the Peak District.
The government is offering English councils £56 million to help high streets and coastal towns reopen as coronavirus restrictions are lifted. They'll be able to spend the money as they wish to encourage shoppers and holidaymakers back to the local economy. Planning permission will also be relaxed so pubs and restaurants can put up marquees for outside seating. International spectators won't be allowed at this summer's Olympics in Japan. Organisers say tickets will be refunded to overseas fans. The Tokyo Games is still going ahead in July after being postponed from last year because of the pandemic. And the Duke of Sussex has reflected on the pain of his mother's death in the foreword to a children's book about losing a loved one. Harry wrote that Diana's death when he was just 12 years old left a huge hole inside of him. Now tonight, wherever you are in England and Wales, you will be counted. It's the official night of the 2021 census. Tomorrow, every householder is required by law to say who was in the property the night before. It happens every 10 years, but now for the first time, people are able to share their sexuality and gender identity, as Frankie McCamley reports.
Is there just one household living in this house, please? Yes.
It's come a long way since the 1960s.
6 rooms.
Gone are the clipboards and door-to-door census visits.
That has to be filled in on tonight.
It's now online and can be completed on almost any device.
The census takes place every 10 years. Its aim is to gain a snapshot of our society, to give local authorities and the government the information they need to plan and fund local services like education, doctors' surgeries and roads.
Collecting data from households across Britain, the UK-wide survey has been changing since its introduction in 1801. This year, for the first time, it's giving over 16s the option to state their sexuality and gender identity. For married couple Richard and Lewis, the census is not just a form this year, it's acceptance.
I think it's long overdue. I mean, when you think of our family setup, we are a 2-dad family, we're actually married, we've got 2 children by adoption, and it seems the census was somewhat a little bit behind. And for us, I guess it's actually given us that when we're filling it out, we will personally feel like included. Something has changed that feels like the future will be better.
A brighter future for some. For others, the census is a valuable slice of history.
What it really shows us actually is how, particularly Victorian society, 1841 onwards, as much more complex. Families were much more complex and much more modern in ways that we would imagine. And also, it really shows us how the changing work nature of Britain alters. So there are all these jobs that we never hear of now. What is a sad iron maker? And you might think that how much our jobs have even changed from 2011. There probably aren't many people like, say, podcast producers in 2011. Now there will be quite a lot in the current census.
No matter what your role or where you live, all information will be anonymised for public bodies to use and won't be made public for 100 years for our future generations to look back and see how we lived in times gone by. Frankie McCamley, ITV News.
To today's main sport now, and Wales will clinch the Six Nations Grand Slam if they beat France in Paris tonight. But today's early kick-off, Scotland are hosting Italy. After falling behind, Scotland quickly took control, running in 4 tries in 20 minutes, ending with this effort by Hugh Jones that secured a bonus point. A short while ago, Scotland were leading by 38 points to 10. Meanwhile, England face Ireland this afternoon, hoping to leapfrog their opponents in the final standings. It's been a disappointing campaign for the English, but George Ford believes they can build on last week's win against France.
We're going away to Ireland, which, you know, is as tough as challenges you're going to come up against. So for us as a team, it's about probably improving and backing up last week, but we want to be better than last week as well.
And you can see that game, England v Ireland, here on ITV this afternoon. Coverage starts at 4 o'clock, just after this news. Football now, and the FA Cup quarter-finals are underway. Southampton are the first team through to the semi-finals after a comfortable 3-0 win at Bournemouth. Nathan Redmond completed the scoring with his second goal of the afternoon. Tonight, Everton host Manchester City in the late kick-off. Finally from me, after 900 years of silence, scientists have been watching the eruption of a volcano in Iceland, more than 40,000 mini-earthquakes over the last month led to seismologists to predict that an eruption was about to happen. And now red lava and clouds of blue gas have been seen from the peak just 20 miles from Reykjavik. There are no plans for evacuations as the volcano is in a remote valley, but the public have been warned to stay away from the area. Sounds like good advice to me. That's it. I'm back with the late news at 10:20. The local news is next, then the rugby. So have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Today, it could be pouring in many places, but not for a little while. Heinz Tomato Ketchup sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello, as we head into this evening, it is going to stay relatively on the quiet side. Although across the north, we're going to see a fairly weak feature coming south. Behind it, colder air coming in, so through the small hours of Sunday we'll probably see a few patches of frost developing with temperatures close to, if not below freezing, particularly up over the tops of the hills and in countryside areas across Scotland, but further south across England and Wales and also Northern Ireland, certainly on the plus side. I think most places certainly escaping a frost. Then on into tomorrow, well, we're going to wake up to fairly cloudy skies across England and Wales, but even here you can see the clouds breaking up as we head through the course of the day. But yet again, much like today, the best of the sunshine is going to be across Scotland and northern parts of England. But you can notice a real difference in temperature after today's impressive highs across the north, whether you're in the north or the south, highs of say 13 or 14 degrees Celsius at the very best. That's how your weather's looking. Have a good day. I'll see you soon.
Heinz Tomato Ketchup sponsors ITV National Weather.